Hello and welcome to another edition of the LCM show. Today we're going to talk about a topic that cannot be avoided, and that is the topic of racism. So today I'm joined with four wonderful people that have decided to talk about this topic with me. First of all, we have Ganel Sims, who is a single young lady training to be a lawyer. She lives in Birmingham. She's agreed to be on the LCM show because she feels that she wants to have a healthy discussion about the way to deal with racism from a godly perspective, having experienced several years of racism within working environments and education. Also, I'm joined with Richard Daisley. He's a Deputy Customer Service Manager in the Operations Department. He's married with 3 adults and 2 grandchildren. He's always had a voice, but never spoken about various things he's experienced and witnessed so far in his life. He wants to encourage the younger generations to educate themselves so they do not accept the status quo, but to become a forceful body to effect change in the world we live in today. Also, I'm joined with Tamara Saah. She is a communications graduate from Southwest London. She has been working in the civil engineering space for a year now and will be starting her master's degree part-time this coming September. Her passion for diversity, inclusion, and social mobility motivated her to come on the show with us today. Last but not least, I'm joined with Adam Charles. He's 28 years old. By day, he works in local government for Haringey Council, organising their community consultations. In his spare time, he records for 2 YouTube channels, and he's joined us on the show because he feels that we need to express the Black experiences. Okay, so wonderful, lovely to see you all. Okay, so now we're going to start off with our first question. I want to ask this question. It says, when was you actually first introduced to the word racism, and how did you respond to this? So can I first of all have Richard, if you can please express, when was you first introduced to the word racism and how did it affect you?
Right. Firstly, Lorraine, thanks for inviting me to come on your show. The word racism, I don't think I really knew anything about it initially until I got into my teens. I didn't understand racism, albeit that I had experiences before in my life, but couldn't work out what the issue was, about the color of my skin. As far as I saw, people were people. It's only as I got older that I recognized, hold on a minute, you're a Black man. And I think it was the latter end of coming out of school. One of the defining moments was when I watched Roots, which is a show that came on. Yes. I think I was around maybe about 14 or 15 when Roots came out. And when it was shown on television, it kind of like invoked a anger within me that Black people were treated so bad. And I had learned a little bit about my history, as in, our forefathers coming from Africa. And I think at school, life just changed. One show and life changed. And then at that time, that's when I knew about racism. I started to think back on all the things that had happened before and recognized, okay, so this is what racism is in some forms. Didn't really understand it as a child growing up, but I sure did as a teenager.
Yeah. Okay, so what was your experience with the first time you came across racism?
Well, it's strange, when you ask about that question and when we sit down and we start to think, we don't really talk about it as Black people because we kind of like ignore the whole, we ignore the experiences that we go through. We don't talk about it. We go on, we move on with life. I was about 8 years old. And my sister and I, we used to live in East London in an area called Poplar. And we used to walk from school to home. Mum used to leave us to walk that journey because school wasn't too far from home, 5 minutes, if that. And every day, I used to get picked on by a couple of white kids who used to come and take my money from me. I used to get beat up.
Yeah.
So what I did at 8 years old was allow my sister to walk in ahead of me. Don't say nothing to mum, right? Because that's the rule that we had. Don't say nothing to mum. And I used to get beat up and didn't understand the reason why. All I thought that they just wanted to take my money. Yeah. But this used to happen every single day. And I didn't have much money, 5, 10p. In those days, that was a lot, yeah, because you used to be able to buy a lot of things for 1p and 2p sweets and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
But it wasn't a lot of money. But I used to get beat up from school, right, on the way home. I still remember the names of the two young guys who used to do this to me. And, you know, I just thought at that time, I thought it was just an issue about taking my money from me. But when I look back on it, is because I was black. And I surely linked the two together. And it was hard. I mean, I was angry. Trust me, I was angry. I wanted to do something. I wanted to fight. But it was always 2 against 1.
Yeah, okay. All right then. So thank you for expressing that. I want to now hear from Adam. If you can please tell me, going back to the first question, when was you first introduced to the word racism and how did you respond to that?
So I was first introduced to the word racism by my mum. It was that typical thing of you're gonna have to work twice as hard to get half as far, or to get just as far as your white counterparts. And funnily enough, at the time, I didn't believe her. I was like, "What are you talking about, mum? That's back in your day. Things have changed now. My white friends love me. The teachers love me. Even though I might backchat a little bit at school, everything's good." But she said, one day you're going to grow up, you're going to see that things aren't as rosy as you think that they are. I said, why? And she slowly but surely explained that it's to do with racism and that there are some people that dislike people like myself and her because of the color of our skin. And then that was sort of compounded as I went through primary school. My grandmother would tell me the same thing, not necessarily in the same words. She would so if I told her something had happened at school, she would always ask me the color of the color of skin of the person who did that thing, and then she'd say, well, you need to go and tell them about them not knowing about good food. They eat beans out of a tin. And I always used to thought, why does she always say that about the white people and not the black people? But so yeah, that's how I first got introduced to racism.
So can you tell me, what age was it then that you arrived and you thought, hold on a minute, yeah, this thing is actually real, racism really does exist? What age was you?
Yeah, I think I was about, I would have been, I was 10, because it was at the 2002 World Cup. And England were playing Brazil, and I will never forget this game because that was my first experience of racism. We watched it in primary school. I was in year 6, I believe, 5 or 6, and I loved Ronaldinho because I just thought he was a really good football player. He looked like me. He was black. I didn't really care that he was from Brazil, but I just saw he was really good at football. I wanted to be good at football, and he looked like me. And so when he scored that goal against David Seaman, I was the only person in my class that celebrated, and I went a bit mad. And so I'm sure you can imagine, and I went to a school on a council estate in Barking, Thames View, and it went down like a ton of bricks. And there was one guy in my class or in the school called Charlie, and he looked at me like he wanted to kill me that day. And he was like, Adam, why are you celebrating? I said, well, Ronaldinho scored a goal. What are you talking about? He said, if you don't like it, get out of the country. And I said, huh? What does that mean? And I didn't realize how bad it was until other white people started reacting to it. And they said, Charlie, you can't say stuff like that. And I didn't really understand again why it was such a big thing. And it's only when I went home, told my family again, that they told me, yeah, you experienced racism today. And I was like, oh, that thing that you told me about from before. And then, yeah, that's how it happened.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. So, Ganel, can we hear from you? What is your response to that?
Right. Hi, everyone. Oh gosh, what's my response to Adam, or just in general, kind of?
I mean, what's your response to the two questions that I've asked so far, which is, you know, when was you first introduced to the word racism, and what was your first experience personally with racism yourself?
Like Richard said, I don't really think I was introduced to the word as, you know, this is racist, but the actions later on, just looking back, really defined it. So it was around primary school, quite young, where I really noticed that my peers, my friends that were white or even Asian, were actually favored more than myself. And so that was whether it was be with resources from school, so laptops, when it was treats, when it was timeouts, different things. And I saw it with myself, I saw it with my other friends that were Black as well. And I thought this was strange. And I'd go home and I'd tell my mom that, you know, the teachers, it was almost like they were picking on me, but I couldn't explain. And my mom never had any bad reports that I misbehaved or anything like that at all. So she couldn't really understand why I would kind of come home saying I'm being picked on or teachers aren't being nice to me. But I noticed there was something different about the way that I was treated in comparison to my friends that were white. And in terms of, I would say, my first encounter that I'd actually put a spin on, as I'm in the legal profession, would definitely be in the legal profession and education as well. My colleague that I worked with, the first thing she said to me when we started working together was, you know, I don't want to be rude, but can I just ask you this question? And I say that to say, my relationship with my colleague was very personal, and, you know, I felt like she could ask me anything. And she said to me, why don't Black people's hair grow? And for me, it was a bit awkward. I was surrounded by other people, and I thought, oh wow, this is the strangest question ever, because my hair actually has a bit of a length, I say. So it was quite interesting when she asked me, and I said, I'm not sure, because I was surrounded by people. I didn't really want to kind of react, and I knew for me as a person as well, it shows on my face. I can really express this kind of frown, like, what do you mean? So I had to kind of tame myself because I was surrounded by my white counterparts. And so I just said, oh, I don't know. And as I went along in that job at the time, I experienced it, knowing that when I'd have meetings, I was unable to kind of share my own voice and opinions for fear of it being, you know, that's what Black people are like and you're confrontational. And I just felt like I always had to mute because I was Black and everybody else was able to share their opinions. But if I shared something similar, it was because I was Black. I was responding in that way. And so, yeah, I think it's been a challenge as I've gone along in my career, because I always kind of have this thing in the back of my mind. Will I be able to climb the ladder for my skill, or, you know, will there be that barrier because I'm Black and I'm going to be accused of sharing strong opinions on certain topics? And so, yeah, that for me really is it. Yeah.
Thank you ever so much for sharing that, Ganel. Okay, so Tamara.
I think the earliest recollection of like being introduced to racism was when I think I was in year 6 going into year 7. So I would say that's quite like late. But I guess that was because you never acknowledge it before. You don't have a word to describe what's happening to you. But so my mum, for my birthday, got me this book called Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry by Mildred D. Taylor. Like, I used to love to, I mean, I still do love to read, but so I got this book, right? And this book can be quite heavy. Like, it's about like America around the kind of Jim Crow era, Great Depression, but from the perspective of like a little Black girl. And it took me about, I probably finished this book maybe the first month into year 7. And I remember talking about it with my like year 7 English teacher, being like, oh, racism, like, it's so awful. Like, I'm so upset that this happened to people, blah, blah, blah. And like, I like categorically remember her engaging with me in the conversation of racism, but as if it wasn't a thing that still happened. it was almost as if like, yeah, like people used to be so bad, like it's a good thing, like people aren't that mean anymore, like things like that. And I just remember like my first response being like, oh, like it was crazy back then, like racism, oh my gosh. But I think that was partly because racism manifests itself differently now. It's not just an old white man calling you the N-word as you're walking down the road, like it manifests itself differently. And yeah, I think I didn't have a word to label those experiences as, and I think I didn't really acknowledge those kind of microaggressions as racism until I got older. But my first like introduction into it was the N-word with the strong ER at the end. Probably my assumption was it only happened in the deep south of America, like that kind of thing. And I think it kind of just goes to show, like, in terms of within education, like that's how it's painted, that racism is this thing of the past that happened a super long time ago, and teachers just kind of like let you go on with that narrative, just I guess maybe to save face, maybe not willing to engage in that kind of conversation, I don't know. But yeah, that was kind of like my first like.
Okay, thank you so much for everybody for expressing how they've experienced this. Now, to end this part one, I want each one of you to think of something that you can say to encourage Black people, people of colour. So if we can actually start with Richard, what can you say to encourage?
Well, my first thing, and maybe it's because of my own, and I built it on these own experiences, the issues that we face daily, because they don't go away, they don't come and in the end, they're daily, is to let every Black person know is that you have value. I'm a commodity. Right now, I think I'm worth more than platinum. So wherever I go, so platinum is more expensive than gold, but we always talk about the gold market. I am of value. Wherever I go, there is not another one of me. I'm unique, not only in the eyes of God, but on this earth. So I'm of value to you. What organization, whether I'm going into school, in tertiary education, doesn't matter, I'm of value. If I walk into a job, or I say walk into, because we don't walk into jobs, but at work, I'm of value. You can't treat me any way that you feel. I won't accept particular behaviors from you because you have to treat me with respect. And I think that any young person now, don't put yourself down because of the color of your skin. Don't see it as a barrier. I see that we have power and strength in the color of our skin, and we can do anything. The other thing as well that I'd like to address is to say about, people talk about the writing on the wall. So people automatically categorize you, put you in a box and say, well, that's that person and you can't move out of that box. Well, no, that doesn't work either. Because whatever writing I want to put on the wall is what I put there and not what you want to put there for me. So if I say that I'm successful, that's what it is. If I'm going to be a policeman, that's what it is. If I'm going to do and be the best, like a doctorate or anything, that's what it is for me. That's what I write, and that's what the goals and the objectives that I'm going to go for. So that's the encouragement. You're of value, and whatever you want to put on the wall is what you write and not what somebody else does.
Preacher on preacher. Okay, Adam, encourage the people of color out there.
Yeah, so my encouragement is to not let anything slide. Do not let anything go. Any microaggression, any issue, don't let it slide, because for too long, I can only speak for Christian circles. I think we've been too nice. We've been too pleasing and wanting to fit in and make everyone else feel comfortable. And I think the time for that is done. And I'm even speaking of myself on this as well. I used to work with Tamara, and some of the things I've experienced at work, the racism, the little sly comments that I've just let go just because I wanted to keep the peace. It's done. It's over now. So I think it doesn't always have to be a case of us running to HR and letting us be a telltale and people saying, "Oh, I can't even have a laugh and joke with Adam." But even if someone gives something to you, give something back. Don't let anything slide. And that's my encouragement.
Thank you ever so much for that. Okay, so Ganel, let's hear from you.
I guess my encouragement really would be teach others how to treat you by how you respond to them. I think as a Christian, for me speaking, whenever I've experienced racism, my first thing has always been to demonstrate the love of God. And even in demonstrating the love of God, it may not necessarily stop the racism or how someone treats me per se, or their perception of me. But I always want to model the love of God. I want to model Christ. And for me, my response is in terms of humility and not trying to defend myself with words, but rather showing through my actions, my work ethic or my worth, and just focusing on being the best that I can be has always spoken louder. And I think the testimony of having someone say, "Oh, I can really tell you're a Christian," or "I can really tell that, you're a loving person," in the midst of them thinking, okay, like, I don't like you because you're black, or I'm intimidated by you because of your skills. I think far outweighs their views of your skin color. And so I definitely say teach others how to treat you by how you respond. If you want someone to love you, or if you want someone to value you, as Richard was saying, teach how you respond to them, whether that's you being hardworking and not retaliating with your mouth, retaliating, being petty. It teaches others something about you, irrespective of how they view you. And so I definitely encourage, that kind of approach to racism. So
Thank you ever so much. So over to you, Tamara. Encourage people of color out there.
I think I would say, like, you're allowed to be an individual. Like, you are not a representation of the black community, the black race. You're allowed to be yourself, and you inherently have value. Like, don't let a particular career or, a particular social group, I guess, push you into a box that doesn't fit who you are. Like, you don't have to, I don't know, like, you don't have to fit the good black kind of narrative to be valuable. Like, you're allowed to, like, you don't have to have a doctorate in order to prove to white people that black people are okay. Like, pursue it because you want to. And yeah, like, just, you're sick, and live it, love it. Yeah.
Lovely. Richard, Tamara, Adam, and Ganel, thank you ever so much for being a part of the LCM show, speaking about a topic that is so dear to us. Thank you ever so much. God bless. Bye.